I refused my father's $5 million company. He laughed, raising a glass to his worthy heir. 3 hours later, the boardroom door opened and the new owner walked in, the one I chose. He thought I was weak, that I didn't understand business, until the hidden clause in the contract forced him to honor his own signature. Some revenge doesn't need shouting, it just needs one no and a quiet team. My name is Natalie Thomas. I am 32 years old, and I am an architect. I don't build houses or skyscrapers. I build the invisible scaffolds that hold the modern world together. I'm a supply chain architect, and on a Tuesday night, I was sitting in a room that smelled of old bourbon and prime rib, watching my father prepare to hand me an empire I never asked for. The heavy dark wood of the dining table at the Port Caldwell Yacht Club was polished to a mirror finish, reflecting the dim, amber lights above. It was a room designed to suffocate, to remind you of the weight of legacy. My father, Robert Blake, sat at the head, his hands, thick and calloused, even in a bespoke suit, rested on either side of his plate. These were hands that had signed payroll for 200 families, hands that had gripped hot rivets, hands that had built North Harbor fabrication from a concrete slab into a $5 million regional player in steel fabrication. He raised his glass, the crystal catching the light. "To family," he began. His voice a familiar, gravelly boom that always made the silverware feel like it was vibrating. His eyes scanned the room, landing on my aunts, my uncles, and my cousins, before finally settling on me. "And to the future," he continued, a shark smile playing on his lips. "I didn't build NHF to sell it off to some strangers in suits. I built it for the bloodline, Natalie." Every head turned. The air thickened with expectation. I'm stepping back. The board is aligned. "It's yours, Nat. The whole thing. North Harbor Fabrication is yours." The silence was immediate and absolute. I could feel the heat of their stares. I could smell the metallic tang of the harbor outside, mixing with the heavy scent of beef. I picked up my water glass, took a slow sip, and set it down with a quiet click on the linen coaster. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed like a dropped steel I-beam. My Aunt Jan's fork clattered onto her plate. My father's smile froze, then twitched. "What did you say?" I said no, Dad. "Thank you, but I don't want it." I kept my voice even, measured, the architect in me speaking. "I don't inherit, I build ecosystems." For a second, there was only the sound of the ventilation system. Then came the laughter. It wasn't a chuckle. It was a deep, seismic, table-shaking eruption from Robert Blake. He threw his head back and roared, the sound bouncing off the dark-paneled walls. "Ecosystems," he bellowed, wiping a tear from his eye. He gestured to the room, to our relatives. "Did you hear that my daughter doesn't want a $5 million company that puts food on 200 tables? She wants to build ecosystems." He pointed a thick finger at me, the humor gone, replaced by a scalding pity. "She dreams in slide decks. All of you thinks the world is run on algorithms and colorful charts." Across the table, my cousin Mason, 24 and perpetually attached to his phone, already had it out. The small red light was on. He was filming me. A smirk plastered on his face, his thumb tapping out a caption I could read even from 10 feet away. "Natalie, too good for the family business. Girl boss fail." My other cousin, Delilah, sitting at my father's right hand, placed a soothing hand on his arm. "Dad, don't," she murmured, though her eyes, when they met mine, were glittering with triumph. She was HR, her biggest achievement the annual company picnic. The rest of the family chimed in, a chorus of condescending murmurs. "She doesn't mean it, Robert. It's the stress of her job. She's not practical." I let the word hang in the air. Unrealistic, impractical. They didn't see the irony. They didn't remember 2 years ago, when the Snoqualmie Slam storm surge had turned downtown Port Caldwell into a tributary. They didn't remember the panic when Cascade Medworks, our only regional hospital, was hours from running out of basic antibiotics and IV bags. The bridges were washed out. The main highways were closed. The governor was talking about airlifts that were still 24 hours away. I wasn't dreaming in slide decks then. I was in my apartment, on 3 different laptops, fueled by stale coffee. The hospital's supply chain was rigid, archaic, built on single-source suppliers and fair-weather logistics. It was built by men like my father. It was built to break. My ecosystem, the thing he mocked, was an algorithm I'd built in my spare time. I called it FlowGrid. It wasn't just data. It was a living map of the unseen. It tracked second and third tier suppliers, mapped old logging roads, analyzed freight capacity of small-time trucking companies everyone ignored. While the hospital CEO was on TV begging for help, FlowGrid found a cache of supplies at a veterinary distributor in the next county. It found a single-truck owner-operator who could navigate a washed-out service road. I didn't just find a solution. I built a new, resilient supply chain in 6 hours. The truck got through. The hospital stayed open. I never sent a bill. I just watched the news report, watched the grateful doctors, and went to sleep. My father knew this story. When I told him, he'd grunted. Clever, but it's not real. Nat, it's just air. You didn't make anything. That was the fundamental difference between us. Robert Blake, my father, worshipped the tangible. He believed in assets you could kick. His gods were the 50-ton hydraulic press, the welding rigs, the towering overhead cranes that moved mountains of raw steel. To him, my work at Riverton Atlas Labs, where I optimized global logistics for medical and tech giants, was a fantasy. It was invisible, and therefore, it was worthless. His company was real. It was $5 million of sweat and steel, and now, at this dinner, he was giving that tangible asset to someone who would kill it. He raised his hand, silencing the table. The laughter was gone. His face was hard, the face of the CEO, the face he used when a union rep stepped out of line. Fine, he said, his voice flat. If Natalie is too busy with her projects, then North Harbor needs a leader who understands its value. He turned to Delilah, her back straightened, her feigned sympathy vanishing, replaced by a hungry practice smile. Delilah has been loyal. She understands the family. She understands the floor. He lied. Delilah hadn't been on the fabrication floor since a piece of slag singed her blazer 3 years ago. The board has agreed. Effective Monday, Delilah will take over as interim CEO. A round of applause, this one genuine and relieved. The crisis was averted. The legacy was secure. Delilah, blushing, accepted hugs and kisses from our aunts. Mason was already posting a new story, probably with a crown emoji over Delilah's head. The dinner was over. It had transformed from an offer to a coronation in less than 10 minutes. I stood up, folding my napkin and placing it on the table. The conversations died down again. I didn't look at Delilah. I looked at my father. I said no, I said, my voice as quiet as before. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stand by and let you people run this company into the ground. It was Delilah who snapped. Run it into the ground, Natalie. We're about to sign the biggest expansion in NHF history. My father just stared at me, that look of profound disappointment back in his eyes. It was the look I'd seen my whole life, every time I chose a textbook over a torque wrench. Then, he laughed again, that same booming, dismissive sound. You, he roared, you want to save it? You, with your spreadsheets. He spread his arms wide, a king in his court. Then take it. Go on. Here are the keys. He jangled the keys to his ridiculously oversized truck, the one with the NHF logo on the side. Oh, wait, he sneered, his voice dropping. You won't, because it's dirty, it's loud, it's work. I walked past the table, past Mason's phone, past Delilah's smug gaze. I stopped when I was shoulder to shoulder with him. I could smell the faint tang of machine oil that never quite washed off him. I leaned in, just close enough for him to hear. I'll save what's worth saving. I left him there, amidst the clinking glasses and the murmurs of his loyal subjects, and walked out of the heavy wooden doors into the cold, damp Port Caldwell night. The fight hadn't just begun. It had been raging for 20 years. He just hadn't realized it. The drive from the Port Caldwell Yacht Club to my apartment is 12 minutes. I made it in 7. The smell of salt and diesel from the harbor doing nothing to clear the scent of bourbon and betrayal from my suit jacket. By 6 a.m. the next morning, I was at my real desk. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Riverton Atlas Labs. My world isn't the dark, heavy wood of my father's club. It's floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the Willamette River. My office doesn't smell like machine oil. It smells like whiteboard markers and ozone from the server room. At RAL, we don't fabricate steel. We move microchips, pharmaceuticals, and sensitive aerospace components across 3 continents. My father thinks I make colorful charts. My colorful charts redirected $2 billion in assets last quarter alone. When I was hired at RAL 4 years ago, I negotiated my contract with a precision that bordered on paranoia. I wasn't just Natalie Thomas, CEO in waiting. I was the architect of FlowGrid. My contract contained a crystal-clear, ironclad moonlighting clause any intellectual property developed on my own time, unrelated to RAL's core business, was mine, exclusively. FlowGrid was my life's work. It was the invisible asset my father mocked. It wasn't just a routing algorithm like the one that saved Cascade Medworks. That was merely its first iteration. The current version was a predictive model for optimizing industrial supply chains, specifically focusing on the volatile, chaotic market of recycled scrap metals. It ingested thousands of data points, freight futures, alloy purity reports, refinery downtimes, even weather patterns, and told you not just what to buy, but the exact second to buy it to minimize waste and cost. It was an ecosystem, and it was mine. I stared at the blinking cursor on my monitor, the memory of my father's laughter echoing in the quiet office. Ecosystems. Slide decks. He had no idea what he had just done. He hadn't just insulted me. He had handed me a motive. I picked up my phone. I did not call my father. I did not call my family. I called the one person in the world who understood that a contract is not a piece of paper, but a weapon. Avery Sloan, attorney at law. Her voice was crisp, awake, and already caffeinated. It was 6:30 a.m. Avery, it's Natalie. Blake, she replied immediately. He did it, didn't he? The succession. He offered. I refused. He gave it to Delilah. There was a pause. I heard the click-clack of a keyboard. Avery wasn't a family counselor. She was a hunter. She specialized in high-stakes MA and complex labor disputes. Her reputation wasn't built on loud courtroom victories. It was built in quiet arbitration rooms where she'd find the one sentence in a 100-page document that everyone else had missed. She hunted orphan clauses forgotten, unloved lines of text that, when activated, could topple entire boards. Delilah, Avery mused. Interesting. Inefficient. What's the real move? Natalie Robert Blake doesn't make a $5 million decision based on a tantrum. Delilah called it an expansion, I said, my mind replaying the dinner. She said they were about to sign the biggest deal in NHF history. He's not expanding, he's selling, Avery said flatly. A man like your father doesn't hand over a legacy to a non-functional family member unless he's dressing the windows for a sale. He's making it look stable, like there's a bloodline in charge. Who's the buyer? I don't know, but I need to stop it. Stop it how you just refused to take the company. I refuse to take it from him. I won't let him sell it to someone who will strip it. Stripping is what buyers do. Nat, we need a lever. You can't sue your father for bad business judgment. Give me 24 hours. I'm pulling every filing North Harbor Fabrication has made since 1970. The line clicked dead. I spent the day in a data-driven haze. I ran projections for RAL's European expansion. I optimized freight routes for a new medical device. I sat in meetings, my face a mask of corporate calm. But in the background, on my private server, FlowGrid was running a different simulation. It wasn't tracking microchips. It was tracking my father. Avery called back at 4 p.m. "Got it," she said. The triumph in her voice was audible. "Your father is an idiot. Be specific." "He's an idiot who forgot what he signed in 1998. The market was tanking, the steelworkers' union was strong, and he needed a labor concession to stay liquid. He gave them something that cost him nothing at the time." I leaned forward. "What did he give them?" "A right of first refusal." The air left my lungs. A rofar, the holy grail of orphan clauses. "He signed an amendment to the NHF corporate charter," Avery explained, her voice quickening as she read from the document. "It states that if any single transaction results in the transfer of more than 30% of the controlling interest of the company, the North Harbor Cooperative Trust has the right to purchase that interest at the identical price and terms offered by the third party." The North Harbor Cooperative Trust, the NHCT. I remembered it. It was the legal entity of the internal union. "But Avery, that union is dead. My father spent the last 20 years breaking it. It's just a ghost." "The union is weak." "Yes." "But the trust," she said, emphasizing the word, "is still a valid, legally registered corporate entity in the state of Oregon. It's dormant, Natalie, not dead, and a ghost with a ROFR is a ghost that can buy a company." A new window opened on my screen. I was already searching. The expansion Delilah mentioned wasn't hard to find in the local business journals. Once I knew what to look for, my father was in late-stage negotiations with a private equity firm, Cobalt Ridge Capital. My blood went cold. I knew that name. We all knew that name in the logistics world. CRC didn't invest. They didn't modernize. They practiced a very specific, very brutal form of business. They called it aggressive restructuring. The industry had a simpler term, flips and strips. Their model was simple. They'd find a legacy company like NHF, a pillar of a small town, usually with an aging owner. They'd buy it with leveraged debt, promising a cash injection and new management. The ink wouldn't be dry before they sold the heavy machinery, the presses, the cranes, the very assets my father worshipped to the highest bidder in Asia. They'd fire everyone with more than 10 years of seniority, wiping out the pension obligations. Then they'd sell the polluted land the factory sat on to a developer. They'd done it to a textile mill in Carolina. They'd done it to a foundry in Ohio. And now they were in Port Caldwell. My father wasn't selling his company. He was feeding it to sharks, and he was paying them for the privilege. "Avery," I said, my voice low. "It's Cobalt Ridge Capital." "Damn," she breathed. "They're fast, and they're dirty. They'll bury us in paperwork. They'll argue this isn't a transfer of control. It's just preferred equity, or a management services agreement. They'll package it as a loan. Can we fight it?" "We can, but the NHCT can't. A dormant trust has no money. To exercise a ROFR, you have to match the offer. Cobalt Ridge is going to offer your father millions. Where does a defunct union get that kind of cash?" "They don't," I said, looking at the glass walls of my office. "We get it for them." My father lived in a world of old money and handshake deals. I lived in a world of new money and structured finance. I made 2 calls. The first was to the Capital Crescent Credit Union, the largest community-focused credit union in the state. They were known for financing employee ownership conversions. They despised predatory funds like CRC that gutted local economies. The second was to the Harbor Impact Fund, a local investment group focused on sustainable, long-term industry. They didn't want dividends. They wanted stable jobs and a green manufacturing base. I met them both that night in a sterile conference room at a hotel near the airport. No dark wood, just fluorescent lighting and bad coffee. I laid it all out: the ROFR, the NHCT, the threat of Cobalt Ridge Capital. "You want us to help you buy your father's company?" the woman from the Impact Fund asked, her arms crossed. "No," I said. I slid a new document across the table. It wasn't a slide deck. It was a structural diagram, an ecosystem. "I don't want to buy it. I want them to buy it." I pointed to the box labeled NHCT. I'm not asking you to fund me. I'm asking you to fund the North Harbor Cooperative Trust. We are going to activate the ROFR and help the workers buy the company for themselves. The credit union manager looked at the numbers. This is $5 million. Ms. Thomas, even if we back the trust, how does a worker co-op, most of whom are welders, turn this company around? How do they compete with CRC's resources? They won't compete with CRC's resources, I said. They'll compete with mine. I turned to the final page. This is my contribution, a 24-month exclusive service contract with FlowGrid. I won't own a single share of North Harbor. I will be their strategic contractor. My algorithm will redesign their entire supply chain. It will cut their scrap metal waste by a minimum of 18% in the first quarter. It will increase their inventory turnover by 12%. It will make them profitable, sustainable, and untouchable. I wasn't offering them a handout. I was offering them a high-performance engine. The room was silent. They saw the plan. They saw the legal loophole, and they saw the profit in the invisible asset. There's one problem, Avery said, tapping the ROFR clause. The linchpin. Cobalt Ridge and your father will fight us. They will claim this isn't a transfer of control. They will hide the real terms. To trigger this, she tapped the paper. We have to prove their deal is a transfer. We have to prove they are buying the controlling interest, not just investing. Then we get the term sheet, I said. The hunt was on. I wasn't just building an ecosystem, I was designing a fortress. And my father, with his new CEO Delilah, was about to hand me the blueprints. The first piece of the puzzle didn't come from a covert source. It came from incompetence. My cousin Delilah, in her first week as interim CEO, was drowning. She was forwarded the preliminary term sheet from Cobalt Ridge Capital, a document dense with financial and legal language she simply could not parse. Confused, she did what most inept managers do. She tried to take her work home. She forwarded the 50-page PDF from her new corporate account to her personal email. What she forgot was that her personal email was still linked to an old, dormant Blake family email group that hadn't been used in 5 years. An email group I was still on. My phone buzzed at 2 a.m. with the notification. I opened the attachment, my blood running cold and hot at the same time. I didn't even read the whole thing. I just saw the title line on page 3, Asset Purchase and Manager Installment Agreement. I forwarded it to Avery. My phone rang 30 seconds later. We have them. Avery's voice was electric, stripped of all sleep. This isn't a loan. This isn't an investment. Read Section 4. Subclause B. I scrolled. My eyes scanned the legalese. CRC retains right to appoint 3 of 5 board seats. CRC holds final veto on all capital expenditures exceeding $10,000. All tangible assets. Schedule a transfer to CRC-controlled holding entity. They're not buying the company, I whispered. They're just taking all the valuable parts and installing a puppet board. Exactly, Avery said. It's a transfer of 70% of the core assets and 100% of the control. This isn't just a trigger for the right of first refusal. This is a 5-alarm fire. They've handed us the match and the gasoline. When are they announcing? I checked the Port Caldwell Civic Center event schedule. They've booked the main hall. 3 days from now. 72 hours. Natalie. That's the clock. The line went dead. 72 hours to fund, activate, and execute a multi-million-dollar corporate buyout on behalf of a union that didn't even know it was alive. I didn't go to Riverton Atlas Labs the next day. I went to the one place my father was sure I despised. I went to the floor of North Harbor Fabrication. The security guard at the gate, a man who used to give me candy when I was a kid, just nodded and waved me through. I still had my old hard hat in the trunk of my car. I put it on, the plastic cold against my skin. The smell hit me first. It's a smell you never forget. Ozone, hot steel, hydraulic fluid, and the sharp, metallic dust that coats the back of your throat. The sound hit me second. The primal scream of the plasma cutters. The rhythmic, earth-shaking thud of the 50-ton press. The roar of the overhead cranes. This was my father's cathedral. I walked past the break room, past the new, absurd, Welcome CEO Delilah banner, and onto the main fabrication line. I found her where I always knew I would, at the primary inspection station, a set of digital calipers in her hand. Rosa Delgado. She'd been the shop foreman for 25 years. When I was 14 and spending a miserable summer as my father's intern, he'd told me to go watch Rosa. Rosa hadn't coddled me. She hadn't been impressed. She'd put a grinder in my hand and taught me how to read a steel batch lot number. She'd taught me that a hairline fracture in a weld wasn't a mistake. It was a tombstone. She was, without question, the most competent human being in the entire building. She saw me approaching and her eyes, framed by safety glasses, widened almost imperceptibly. She finished her measurement, logged it on her tablet, and motioned me into her small, glass-walled office. "Natalie," she said, her voice calm, not welcoming, not hostile, just observant. She pulled the door shut, muffling the roar to a dull thunder. "You're a long way from your glass tower." "Hello, Rosa. You heard about the dinner." "We all heard." She crossed her arms. Her forearms were scarred from decades of flash burns. "Delilah, your father's lost his mind. He's lost the company. Rosa, I didn't waste time. I laid it out. Cobalt Ridge Capital, the term sheet, the asset strip." She didn't flinch. She just nodded slowly, a deep, tired anger settling onto her face. "So that's the name. We knew a buyer was coming. We're not stupid. We've seen the suits. We've seen them taking pictures of the new press." "They're going to fire the senior welders first," I said. "The ones with the highest pay and the biggest pensions. Then they'll sell the machinery. The building will be empty in 6 months." "We know," she said quietly. "The boys are terrified. Some of them, some of us, are willing to take a pay cut we were going to offer, but Delilah," she scoffed. "She wouldn't even know who to talk to." "A pay cut won't save you," I said. "They don't want your concessions. They want your assets. But there's a way. The old union charter, the cooperative trust." I explained the ROFR. I explained the ghost in the machine. Rosa looked at me, her gaze sharpening, hunting for the angle. "You're Robert Blake's daughter. You want to take the company from him. Is that it?" "I don't want the company. I want you to have it. I want the trust to buy it." "With what?" "Natalie. Our 401ks. With a fund I'm putting together, Capital Crescent and the Harbor Impact Fund. But to get their money, I need to prove 2 things. First, that the deal with CRC is a transfer of control. I have that." I tapped my phone, where the email was saved. "Second," I continued, "I have to prove that North Harbor is worth more with you than it is without you. I need to prove that CRC is getting a bargain. I need to build a new data room. I need the real numbers. Rosa, not the ones Delilah is giving them. I need the maintenance logs, the real-time scrap rates, the accident reports, the current order backlog, everything." Rosa was silent for a full minute. I could see the gears turning. She was calculating the risk. Giving me that data was corporate espionage. It was her career. "He was always a bastard, your father," she said finally. "But he was a bastard who built things. These new people, they're just vultures. I'll get you the data." She pointed to a drive on her desk. "I've been keeping my own logs for 10 years. He taught me to trust the steel, not the suits." By 6 p.m., I was in a borrowed conference room with Avery and the 2 funders. Rosa's data was a goldmine. It was everything CRC didn't see or didn't care about. The official reports showed maintenance costs rising. Rosa's logs showed this was because the night shift, run by a manager my father hired, was skipping predictive maintenance and running the machines hot to hit a bonus quota. The official reports showed a 30% scrap rate on high-tensile steel. Rosa's logs showed it all came from one miscalibrated plasma cutter that was $3,000 to fix. "They're not just inefficient," I told the funders, my fingers flying across the keyboard, feeding Rosa's data into the flow grid simulation. "They're actively self-destructing. The company isn't worth $5 million. It's bleeding. I turned the laptop around. The FlowGrid interface lit up the wall. This is North Harbor today, a chaotic map of red lines, bottlenecks, and flashing red alerts for waste. And this, I clicked, is North Harbor with FlowGrid and a competent manager like Rosa in charge. The screen redrew itself. The red lines turned green. New, optimized routes appeared. My algorithm, using Rosa's data, identifies an immediate 18% reduction in scrap by rerouting orders. It shows a 12% increase in inventory turnover by optimizing the scrap metal purchasing schedule. This isn't a $5 million company, or the $3 million CRC is probably paying. This is a $7 million company. Easy. The funders were impressed, but not sold. It's a beautiful projection, Ms. Thomas, the man from Harbor Impact said. But it's still a projection. Banks don't lend on algorithms. They lend on contracts. To exercise the ROFR, we have to match CRC's offer, whatever it is. And to do that, we need a guaranteed revenue stream. We need a stable, long-term contract to secure the note. 18 months, minimum. Avery nodded. He's right. We need an anchor client. An anchor, a guaranteed buyer. My father's client list was all short-term. Regional construction. No one was signed for more than 6 months. My mind raced. 18 months. Green manufacturing. Safety. The words clicked into place. I stood up. Excuse me? I walked out into the hallway, my heart pounding. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 2 years. The CEO of Cascade Medworks picked up on the second ring. This is Natalie Thomas. There was a pause. I know exactly who you are, he said, his voice warm. You're the woman who saved my hospital. I've told the story a dozen times. What can I do for you? Ms. Thomas, anything. I need a contract, I said. I told him everything. NHF, the co-op, the CRC threat. Then I made the pitch. You're building the new oncology wing. You need medical-grade steel framing. You need it to be seismically sound. And you need a supplier who can guarantee a clean, reliable, and auditable supply chain. CRC will gut NHF. But the co-op, we can retool. We can get the new ISO certifications. We can be your dedicated supplier. We can use FlowGrid to guarantee your just-in-time delivery for the entire build. That's a big promise, Natalie, he said. And I'm a big promise keeper. You know I am. What do you need? I need a letter of intent, a contract for $6.2 million, over 18 months, contingent on 2 things: the worker co-op successfully acquiring the company, and NHF achieving full green steel and safety certifications within 90 days of close. It was a massive ask. He was quiet for so long I thought the line had dropped. Send me the LOI, he said finally. If your name is on it, my board will sign it. You saved my patients. Natalie, the least I can do is help you save your city. I hung up, leaning against the wall, the first real breath I'd taken in 48 hours, shuddering out of me. I walked back into the conference room. Avery and the funders looked up. We have our anchor, I said. 6.2 million, 18 months, get the money ready. Avery smiled. It was a thin, dangerous smile. Excellent, because I just got a tip from a friend at the Civic Center. CRC isn't just announcing the deal. They're hosting a signing ceremony with your father. They're bringing in the press from Portland. They're making it a media event. The clock was no longer a vague deadline. It was a public execution. 72 hours, I said. Let's get to work. The media offensive began exactly 48 hours before the signing. Cobalt Ridge Capital, true to their playbook, didn't just issue a press release. They bought the front page of the Port Caldwell Gazette's business section. A new dawn for North Harbor, the headline blared, over a professionally shot photo of my father shaking hands with a silver-haired man I didn't recognize, one of CRC's managing partners. The article was a masterpiece of corporate propaganda, slick with words like synergy, modernization, and strategic investment. It painted CRC as a savior, injecting vital foreign capital to secure the future of a beloved local institution. They had scheduled the press conference for 10 a.m., Wednesday, at the Civic Center. It wasn't just an announcement, it was a coronation. My phone rang at noon. My father's name flashed on the screen. "Did you see the paper, Natalie?" His voice was brimming with a smug, oily victory. He didn't wait for an answer. That's what saving a company looks like, not ecosystems. It's a bold move, Dad. It's a smart move. These CRC guys, they're sharks. But there are sharks now. They're going to streamline everything. He paused, savoring it. The signing is tomorrow, 10 a.m., Civic Center. You should come. If you want to fix your mistake, come and listen. Watch how real business is done. I wouldn't miss it, I said, and hung up. While my father was preening for the cameras, Avery Sloan was at her desk. She wasn't dealing with the media. She was dealing with the law. At precisely 3 p.m., exactly 48 hours before the scheduled signing the legal minimum for serving notice she filed, she sent a registered, bonded, and electronically verified notification to CRC's legal department, my father's attorney, and the corporate registrar for the state of Oregon. It was one page. Pursuant to the North Harbor Fabrication Corporate Charter, Article 11, Section 4, 1998, the North Harbor Cooperative Trust NHCT hereby gives formal notice of its intent to exercise its right of first refusal on the pending transaction with Cobalt Ridge Capital. Please forward the final, binding term sheet to our offices for matching. She attached a single exhibit, Exhibit A. It was the PDF Delilah had so conveniently leaked, with the Asset Purchase and Manager Installment Agreement title clearly visible. The response from Cobalt Ridge's legal team was thermonuclear. It arrived in Avery's inbox 4 hours later, a 10-page salvo of threats and dismissals. "This is a joke," Avery said, reading it aloud to me over the phone. She sounded bored. "They claim the ROFR is null and void. They claim the NHCT is a defunct entity with no standing. They claim the transaction is not a transfer of control, but a strategic minority asset-backed loan, and therefore the ROFR does not apply. They are threatening tortious interference. They are, in short, panicking." "They're bluffing," I said. "They know we have the term sheet." "Of course they are. And now, we call their bluff." Avery's reply was a model of restraint. It was 2 sentences long. "We respectfully disagree with your characterization. Please find attached the addendum to the term sheet, signed by your client and Mr. Robert Blake, which explicitly grants Cobalt Ridge Capital 3 of 5 board seats and covenants regarding the immediate liquidation of primary assets as listed in Schedule A. This is, by any legal definition, a transfer of control. We will see you on Wednesday." She attached the addendum, the one with my father's digital signature at the bottom. This time, the response was silence. Avery had just legally cornered them. They couldn't argue against their own addendum without admitting they had misled my father. They couldn't proceed with the signing without acknowledging our right. They were trapped. But I wasn't relying on one trap. CRC was a wounded animal, and wounded animals are the most dangerous. They would fight this in court, try to bury the tiny NHCT in legal fees until our funders got cold feet. I needed to make the acquisition itself radioactive. My next call was to a man named Harrison. Harrison was one of the best independent safety auditors in the Pacific Northwest. He specialized in OSHA compliance for heavy manufacturing. "Harrison, it's Natalie Thomas." "Ms. Thomas, I read about your father's company." "Congratulations on the new investment," he said dryly. "That's why I'm calling. I have a hypothetical. I'm looking at a company. Let's call it NHF. It's on the edge, safety-wise, old machines, but good people. Now, a new owner comes in. Their business model involves cutting predictive maintenance, extending machine hours, and reducing floor staff by 30% to service the debt. What does that look like?" "It looks like a disaster," Harrison said. "You're not talking about fines, Ms. Thomas. You're talking about a stop work order. You're talking about catastrophic failure. People get maimed. Plants get shut down. I have the maintenance logs," I said, looking at the data Rosa had given me. And I have the new owner's draft operational budget. I'm sending them to you. I need a full, independent audit. I need to know exactly what violations would occur. Day 1, if they implement this plan, and I need it in 24 hours. While Harrison dug into the safety violations, I worked on the media. CRC had built a beautiful narrative. It was time to tear it down. I used a secure, anonymous email service. I sent one message to a single reporter, a hungry investigative journalist at the Oregonian who had a reputation for hating private equity. The subject tip: Cobalt Ridge Capital's Port Caldwell Miracle, the body. You're covering the NHF press conference tomorrow. You might want to ask CRC's managing partner about their last miracle. Ask them about the Atlantic Foundry in Ohio, 2019. Ask about the Blue Ridge Mill in North Carolina, 2021. I've attached the public layoff notices from all 3 states. They call it aggressive restructuring. The families they put out of work call it flips and strips. 200 jobs gone in Ohio, 400 pensions wiped out in Carolina. Port Caldwell is next. I attached the public records. I hit send. The first ripple hit 8 hours later. The Oregonian reporter must have called CRC for comment. Suddenly, CRC's PR machine scrambled. They needed a local face, fast. They needed to counter the narrative of the faceless corporate raider. They found the perfect puppet. A new article appeared on a local business blog, complete with a soft focus photo of Delilah, sitting in my father's chair, looking earnest and completely out of her depth. A new generation Delilah Blake commits to family legacy, welcomes CRC partnership. The article was fluff, but the interview quotes were damning. When asked about the specifics of the deal, Delilah stumbled. It's a very synergistic partnership. This asset loan, it means we can look at the future with new eyes. She didn't even know the difference between an asset loan and an asset purchase. She hadn't read the term sheet. She was just a prop, a glocal face to put on the chopping block. The final piece was the most human. I met Rosa at dawn on Wednesday, hours before the press conference, at an all-night diner miles from the plant. Her eyes were tired but steady. "They're scared," she said, stirring her coffee. "The rumors are flying. They're talking layoffs." "They will be," I said. "Rosa, the press will be there today. They're going to talk about money and machines. CRC and my father will not talk about people, but you can. What do you want me to do? Storm the stage?" "No, I just want you to be there. I've arranged a press pass for you, as a concerned local business leader. When they open the floor to questions, I want you to ask one, or if a reporter asks you what the workers think, I want you to be ready." I slid Harrison's finished audit across the table. It was brutal. 4 clear, imminent, life-threatening OSHA violations if CRC's budget was implemented. This is what they're investing in, Rosa. They're planning to cut the maintenance budget that keeps the number 3 press from failing. They're planning to run the plasma cutters without the proper ventilation filters. Rosa's hand tightened on her mug. She knew exactly what a failure on the number 3 press meant. "You don't have to say anything," I said. "But if you get the chance, just ask them. Ask Delilah. Ask my father. Ask them to guarantee, right now, that they will not cut the safety and maintenance budget. Ask them if they've read the latest audit." She pushed the report back to me. "I don't need to read it. I live it. I'll be there." I paid for the coffee and walked out into the cold morning air. My father's phone call, Avery's legal filings, Harrison's audit, the reporter's anonymous tip, and Rosa's righteous anger. All the pieces were on the board. My father was expecting an apology. Cobalt Ridge Capital was expecting a minor legal fight. I remained completely, perfectly silent. I was bringing a war. They were all set to detonate at exactly 10 a.m. The war room was a generic, soul-crushing beige conference room at an airport hotel, chosen for its anonymity and its high-speed internet. It was 9 p.m., the night before the signing. 12 hours to go. Avery was on her laptop, monitoring the legal chatter. The Harbor Impact Fund and the credit union were on standby. their funds ready to be wired to the escrow account Avery had established. Rosa was there, fresh off the shop floor, her face grim. "We have the money, we have the law, and we have the media primed," I said, pacing the room. "But we are missing the most important part, the NHCT. The trust is a legal ghost. We need to give it a body. We need its designated representative." Rosa nodded. "He's waiting outside. I asked him to come. He's the last elected trust rep from the old union charter. Before your father broke it, he's the only one who can legally sign." "Who is he?" Avery asked, not looking up from her screen. "Jonah Price," Rosa said. I stopped pacing. Jonah Price. I hadn't heard that name in a decade. He was a master welder, a true artist with a TIG torch. He was also the man my father had personally and publicly scapegoated for a structural failure on a bridge contract. The failure wasn't Jonah's. It was a cheap batch of steel my father had bought from an uncertified supplier to save a few $1,000s. Jonah knew it. My father knew it. But Jonah was the one who got a 3-month suspension and a permanent black mark on his record. Rosa opened the door. Jonah Price was a tall man, built like the I-beams he welded. He had the kind of stillness that comes from absolute physical competence. He looked at Avery, then at Rosa, and finally, his eyes settled on me. They were cold. "I know who you are," he said to me. His voice was a low rumble. "You're Robert Blake's daughter." "Jonah, thank you for coming," I said. "Rosa said you had a plan," he said, ignoring my thanks. He crossed his arms, staying near the door. "I've heard about your plan. I've been hearing it all day on the floor. Heard you're trying to take the company." "Jonah," Rosa started. "That's not what this is. It's what it looks like," he snapped. His gaze locked on me. "I've seen your father pull every dirty trick in the book for 20 years. Now his daughter shows up, the one who was too good for the grease, and she wants to use the old union charter to stage a hostile takeover. You just want to shine by climbing on our backs. You're just like him, but with better lawyers." The accusation hung in the air, sharp as ozone. I didn't defend myself. I didn't apologize. I walked to the whiteboard. "You're right about my father," I said, picking up a black marker. "You're wrong about me." I drew 3 boxes. "This is the new board of directors for the North Harbor Cooperative Fabrication. 3 seats. I wrote a name in the first box, Rosa Delgado, Chief Operations. I wrote a name in the second box, Jonah Price, Worker Representative. I pointed to the third box. This seat goes to the Harbor Impact Fund, to represent the loan. They hold it for 18 months, until the anchor contract is stable. Then, you and Rosa elect a third member from the community." I looked at him. "My name isn't on the board. Jonah, I don't want a seat. I don't want a single share. I am not the owner. I am the first contractor." His eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means you, Rosa, and the other 198 employees are the owners. The trust buys the company, the new company, which you will run, signs a 24-month service agreement with my company. Flowgrid. I optimize your supply chain. I make you profitable. I get paid a service fee. If I don't deliver, you fire me. That's the deal." He was silent, but his arms uncrossed. "How are the shares divided?" he asked. "I modeled it 2 ways," I said. "This is the one I recommend." I slid a printout across the table. Ownership shares are distributed based on 2 factors: seniority, weighted at 60%, and a commitment to completing the new safety and retraining certification, weighted at 40%. It's not a handout. It's an investment in the people who already put in the work. He picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the structure. He was actually reading it before he could respond. Rosa's phone buzzed violently on the table. She looked at the text, and her face darkened. "Damn it," she hissed. "Mason." "What?" I asked. "Your cousin. He's on the night shift, walking the floor. He's telling everyone that you're staging a coup so you can fire all the senior staff and bring in your own tech people from Portland. He's saying you're just a prettier version of CRC. He's telling them not to sign anything. Jonah looked at me, the suspicion returning. This is your family, Thomas. How do we fight that? We don't, Rosa said, grabbing her jacket. I do. She was out the door in 10 seconds. Jonah and I looked at each other and followed. We got to the plant in 5 minutes. The night shift was humming, but the tension was thick. We found Mason holding court in the main break room, a small crowd of younger, worried welders around him. I'm just telling you what I heard, Mason was saying, his voice full of false concern. She's playing you. She's mad at her dad. She wants to take this place, bleed it dry with her consulting fees, and then sell it. You're all going to be out of a job. Get out of my break room. Mason, Rosa's voice cut through the air. The welders turned. Aunt Rosa, Mason said, trying to smile. I'm just talking to the guys. I heard what you're saying, Rosa said, walking right up to him. The whole shift was watching now. You want to talk about loyalty. You want to talk about who bleeds this company dry. She pointed a finger at his chest. I've been here 25 years. You've been here too. I see you running your mouth about Natalie Thomas. Let me tell you about Natalie Thomas. She turned to the room. You all remember the big storm 2 years ago, when the surge flooded the front office and my father broke the primary intake. The company was dead in the water for weeks. Robert Blake, her father, was about to default on our health insurance premiums. He was going to put us all on COBRA. 200 families. The room was dead silent. Who do you think covered that premium? She shouted, her voice echoing off the cinderblock walls. Who quietly wired $80,000 of her own money to the insurance carrier, so your kid's asthma inhaler would still be covered. It wasn't your CEO, Delilah. It wasn't Robert. It was Natalie. She never told anyone. She never asked for it back. She just did it. So you tell me. Mason, whose family? Mason was white as a sheet. He looked around, but no one would meet his eyes. He mumbled something and practically ran from the room. Rosa turned back to the welders. Jonah has the real plan. You listen to him, not to that boy. We walked back to the conference room, the silence heavier this time. Just as we sat down, my phone vibrated, a text message from an unknown number. CRC just called me. They're panicking about your lawyer. They told me my interim role is transitional. They're firing all department heads, me included. I'm out. Don't tell your dad I told you. It was from Delilah, a pathetic, desperate act of self-preservation. But it was also the final confirmation. CRC was a house of cards, and Avery's legal letter was a gust of wind. Jonah sat down at the table. He looked at the structural diagram again. He looked at Rosa. This is all good paper, he said, his voice quiet. But I've been burned by paper before. The money, this anchor contract, this Cascade MedWorks. $6.2 million. Is it real? It's real, I said. The LOI is in the folder. I don't want to read it, he said. He pulled out his own phone. I want to hear it. He found the number for Cascade MedWorks' main office. It was after 10 p.m., but he dialed the CEO's extension from the letterhead. It rang and rang. You've reached the office of... Jonah hung up, his face set. No answer. Jonah, it's 10 at night, I said. He's not... If I'm putting my name on a line that starts a war with Robert Blake, he said, I need to know the guns are loaded. My mind raced. I couldn't let it die here, I thought. The CEO, the hospital. Dial this number, I said, writing my old contact for the hospital's head of procurement, the one I'd worked with during the storm. It's his personal cell. Tell him Natalie Thomas gave it to you. Jonah watched me, then slowly dialed. Yeah, a sleepy voice answered. My name is Jonah Price, he said, his voice steady. I'm the representative for the North Harbor Cooperative Trust. I apologize for the hour, but I was given this number by Natalie Thomas. The pause on the other end was immediate. Natalie, is she okay? What's going on? She's fine. I'm calling about a letter of intent. $6.2 million. For the new oncology wing, I need to know if it's real. Real? The man's voice was sharp, fully awake now. Mr. Price, I've got that LOI sitting on my desk, signed by my CEO. We are just waiting on the word from Ms. Thomas that her side is ready. You tell her. You tell all of them. If Natalie Thomas is building it, Cascade Medworks is buying it. That contract is iron. You have our full support. Jonah listened, his expression unreadable. Thank you, he said. That's all I needed to know. He hung up the phone. He stood up, walked to the whiteboard, and picked up the black marker. He pointed to the box with his name in it. This board seat, he said. It's not mine. It's elected. By the floor. Every 2 years. Done, I said. He nodded. He grabbed the stack of formal notices Avery had prepared. The legal authorization for the NHCT to exercise the ROFR. Rosa, he said, let's go get some signatures. We've got a company to buy. I was alone in the war room, the adrenaline starting to fade. It was almost midnight. The pieces were in place. The army was mobilized. The door opened. I thought it was Rosa, but it was my father. He looked exhausted. The smugness from the phone call was gone, replaced by a deep, weary anger. He must have come from the plant, heard about Mason and Rosa. Stop this, he said. No greeting. Whatever this game is, stop it. You're embarrassing me. You're scaring the buyers. They should be scared, I said. Natalie, he said, and his voice changed. It was the voice he used when I was a little girl, the one that meant, listen to Dad. It made my stomach turn. This is out of your league. These CRC people are not your tech buddies. They will crush you. They will crush this little trust and everyone in it. Then why are you here? He sighed, running a hand over his face. Because they're flexible. They're willing to be reasonable. They're panicking. Nat, they think you found some loophole. I have. It doesn't matter, he snapped, his mask slipping. They'll tie you up in court for 5 years, but they don't want to. They're willing to make a concession. A concession. They know you're smart, he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. We appreciate your passion. We'll create a role, Chief Operating Officer, a real one. You can run the place. You can implement your systems. You'll report to the new board, but you'll have control of the floor. All you have to do is call off your lawyer. Stop this ROFR nonsense. Let the deal go through. He was offering me a title, a nominal role as COO. He was offering me the very thing he'd just given Delilah, a puppet job, a way to silence me. He was offering me a cage. I looked at him, at this man who had built an empire and was now bargaining with his own daughter to sell it for scrap. I already said no to you once, Dad, I said. My voice was quiet, but the beige room felt like it was vibrating. And this time, it's forever. His face hardened. The negotiator was gone. The king was back. You'll regret this, he whispered. By 10 a.m. tomorrow, you will have destroyed this family, and you'll have nothing. He turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I looked at the clock. 7 hours to go, the morning of the signing. The air over Port Caldwell was still and cold, heavy with the metallic tang of the harbor. The calm was deceptive. It was the deep, unnatural silence before a pressure system breaks. By 9:30 a.m., the Port Caldwell Civic Center was already a stage set for a hostile takeover. Cobalt Ridge Capital had parked 2 massive 18-wheelers on the plaza out front, their canvas sides freshly stenciled with a new, soulless logo, CRC North Harbor. They hadn't even signed the papers, and they were already painting over my father's name. It was an act of pure, calculated arrogance. I sat in my car in a parking garage a block away, watching. My preparations were finished. My role as an architect was over. Now, I was just a trigger. My phone buzzed. A text from Avery. Escrow is funded. Capital Crescent and Harbor Impact have wired the full matching amount. All terms mirror the CRC offer, plus our ROFR notice. The gun is loaded, chambered, and the safety is off. Go. I read the message and felt nothing, no fear, no elation, just a cold, quiet certainty. I had my own arsenal. On my laptop, I reviewed the final report from Harrison, the safety auditor. It was beautiful in its lethality. 4 critical, non-negotiable items. If CRC implemented their new budget, the one Delilah had leaked, they would be in immediate violation of federal OSHA standards. Not a fine, a mandatory, immediate stop work order on the number 3 press and the main plasma cutting bay. Harrison had filed it with the state registrar an hour ago. It was now a public document. Queued up on my phone was a 2-minute video. It was a simple, elegant flow grid simulation. On the left, a screen showing the current NHF floor plan, bleeding red with waste, scrap rates flashing at 18%. On the right, the flow grid optimized layout, running clean and green, scrap rates dropping to under 3%, a proof of concept, an invisible asset made visible. At 9:40, I received a final text from Rosa. We're here, and I have the signed agreement from Port Caldwell Tech. Full apprenticeship and safety recertification program. Starts Monday. Jonah is waiting for the queue. I got out of the car. I wore simple black trousers, flat shoes, and a white silk blouse. No jacket, no briefcase, no name badge. I was just a member of the public. I walked into the Civic Center, past the CRC banners, past the table piled high with glossy press kits, and found a spot at the very back of the hall. I stood against the wall, near the main entrance, invisible. The room was buzzing. The local press was here, along with the Portland business journals. At the front, a long mahogany table was set up with leather blotters, expensive pens, and bottles of sparkling water. Behind it, a massive banner, North Harbor Fabrication, a New Vision. I saw him, my father, Robert Blake. He was wearing his best suit, the charcoal gray one he wore to shareholder meetings. He looked powerful, relieved, and victorious. He was standing with the 3 CRC executives, laughing at something one of them said. He was holding a set of index cards, and I could see him mouthing his speech. Family, legacy, vision. Delilah was there, hovering at his elbow. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her red power suit was slightly too large, and she kept smoothing the lapels, her eyes darting nervously to the CRC men. Mason was, predictably, filming everything on his phone for his social media audience. At 9:50, Rosa walked in. She was wearing her press pass. She was not the foreman today. She was a stateswoman. She wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit. Her hair pulled back. She looked more like a CEO than anyone at the front table. She didn't look for me. She walked calmly to the 3rd row and sat down directly next to the sharp-eyed Oregonian reporter my anonymous tip. The two of them began a quiet, intense conversation. At 9:58, the CRC public relations head, a woman with a fixed, bright red smile, stepped to the podium. If everyone could please take their seats, we're about to begin. The room hushed. The CRC executives, my father, and Delilah arranged themselves behind the long table. The cameras flashed. Welcome, the PR woman began. We are so thrilled to... Wait, the voice was Delilah's. It was thin, reedy, but it cut through the silence. The PR woman froze, her smile twitching. My father looked at Delilah, annoyed. What is it? Delilah wrung her hands. It's just, before we do the official signing, it's a family tradition. She was improvising, badly. I think we should have a photo, to welcome our partners, to the NHF family, all of us together. My father, caught off guard, beamed. This was a narrative he understood. What a wonderful idea. Delilah, yes. Family and partnership, together. The CRC men looked like they'd just swallowed acid, but they were trapped. They stood up, forcing smiles as my father and Delilah squeezed in between them. Right here, everyone, my father boomed to the photographers. The cameras flashed. a rapid-fire volley of light, and in that moment, as they were all pinned in place by the lenses, the Oregonian reporter raised his hand. He didn't wait to be called on. His voice was loud and clear. A question for Cobalt Ridge. You talk about partnership, but your acquisition of Atlantic Foundry in Ohio resulted in 200 immediate layoffs, and your restructuring of Blue Ridge Mill in North Carolina wiped out 400 pensions. Is that the family tradition you're bringing to Port Caldwell? The air was sucked from the room. The smiles on the stage shattered. My father's face went from ruddy to pale. He looked at the CRC execs, who were staring daggers at the reporter. The local journalist, smelling blood, jumped in. Can you guarantee, right now, that there will be no layoffs at North Harbor? The CRC PR woman rushed to the mic. We are not here to discuss baseless rumors or unrelated operations. We are here to celebrate a new, strategic... So you won't deny it, the Oregonian reporter shouted. We have no comment, she snapped. My father, flustered and angry, grabbed the microphone. This is a day of celebration. We are here to secure the future of this plant, to bring in a new vision. He was losing the crowd. The room was muttering. He looked at his index cards, desperate to get back on script. It's time, he bellowed, trying to regain control. It's time to make this official. Let's sign the papers. Let's bring in the new owner. In his panic, he gestured, not to the CRC men standing right next to him, but to the main entrance at the back of the hall. He was following his original, dramatic script, the cue. I took one, small step sideways, clearing the doorway. The heavy oak double doors of the Civic Center swung open with a pneumatic hiss. It was exactly 10 a.m. My father had cued the entrance. He just had the wrong cast. Through the double doors, two figures walked in. They were not the slick, silver-haired partners from Cobalt Ridge Capital. It was Jonah Price and Rosa Delgado. They weren't wearing work boots or safety vests. They were both in simple, dark, professional suits. They looked like what they were, the new owners. Their faces were calm, resolute, and utterly devoid of fear. Behind them, in lockstep, walked the CEO of the Capital Crescent Credit Union and the managing director of the Harbor Impact Fund, both holding identical leather portfolios. They didn't stop in the back. They didn't hesitate. They walked, with measured, confident steps, right down the center aisle, past the stunned reporters, past the confused faces of my extended family, and stopped directly in front of the mahogany table. My father stared, his mouth half open, his welcome speech dead on his lips. The CRC executives looked at each other, a sudden, sharp panic dawning. What is the meaning of this? The head CRC executive snapped, his voice a harsh bark. Who are you? Security Avery Sloan, who had been standing quietly by the side wall, stepped forward. She was not in the back with me. She was front and center. She placed her own leather portfolio on the podium, displacing the CRC's glossy press kit. She exuded an icy, absolute authority. They are the North Harbor Cooperative Trust, Avery said, her voice clear and amplified by the microphone. It cut through the room like a diamond drill. And they are the rightful buyers. A chaotic murmur erupted. The CRC executive turned a deep, furious purple. This is preposterous. This meeting is for the announcement of our strategic partnership. This is illegal. Avery didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Gentlemen, pursuant to the North Harbor Fabrication Corporate Charter, Article 11, Section 4, filed and ratified in 1998, the North Harbor Cooperative Trust hereby exercises its right of first refusal. She looked directly at the CRC executive. The trust has met your offer. The full binding legal file, along with the entire purchase amount, has been deposited into a secured third-party escrow account as of 8 a.m. this morning. North Harbor Fabrication is sold, just not to you. The lead CRC lawyer, a younger, frantic man in the front row, leaped to his feet. Invalid, that clause is void. The trust is a defunct entity. Furthermore, our transaction is a minority asset-backed loan. not a transfer of control. The ROFR is not triggered. My father clung to this, his face flooded with relief. He's right. It's a loan. It's not a sale. This is ridiculous, Natalie. Call this off. All eyes turned to me, still standing at the back. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just held my father's gaze. Avery held up a single, stapled document. It was the one Delilah had leaked, the addendum. "This is the addendum to your loan agreement," Avery said, her voice dropping, forcing the room to go silent to hear her. "The one you had Mr. Blake sign last week?" She turned and nodded to a tech at the back. A projector flared to life, casting an image onto the New Vision banner, swallowing it whole. It was a high-resolution scan of the addendum's signature page. "This addendum," Avery continued, "grants Cobalt Ridge Capital 3 of the 5 board seats, giving you a 60% controlling majority. It grants you final veto on all capital expenditures. And it explicitly covenants for the expedited liquidation of assets listed in Schedule A, namely, the heavy presses and the cranes." She paused, letting the words sink in. "That is not a loan. Gentlemen, that is a textbook definition of a transfer of control. You triggered the clause yourselves." The CRC lawyer just stood there, his mouth opening and closing. My father stared at the screen, at the damning text. I never agreed to that," he stammered, his voice weak. I thought that was just standard." "Then you should have read it, Robert," Avery said, her voice devoid of sympathy. She pointed to the bottom of the screen. "But you did sign it. That is your digital signature. Time-stamped last Tuesday." My father's digital signature, bold and undeniable, blazed on the screen above his head. He looked at it, then at the CRC executives, his face a mask of dawning, horrific comprehension. He had been played. He had been swindled. He had been so eager to get his win over me that he hadn't even read the terms of his own surrender. The press erupted. It wasn't a murmur. It was a roar. Cameras flashed so fast the room looked like it was in a thunderstorm. Reporters were shouting questions over each other. The live stream feeds, which had been capturing a boring press conference, were now capturing a public execution. The view counter on the main feed, visible from the text table, was spiking, climbing by thousands every second. Rosa stepped forward, taking the second microphone. She looked, not at my father, but at the cameras. "My name is Rosa Delgado," she said, her voice shaking slightly, but gaining strength with every word. "I have worked at North Harbor Fabrication for 25 years. I am the shop foreman. These men," she pointed at CRC, "call us assets to be liquidated. They talk about restructuring. We know what that means. It means firing the most experienced welders. It means cutting safety budgets. It means my people, my family get hurt or get fired." She looked at Jonah. "We, the people who stand on that shop floor every day, the people who actually build the things that make this company valuable, we choose. We choose safety. We choose secure jobs. We choose to stay in Port Caldwell. We choose ourselves." Jonah Price stepped up next to her. He was a mountain of quiet integrity. "Cobalt Ridge Capital offered my father $5 million, I heard him say, his voice low and powerful. They offered him cash, based on a plan to strip the company and fire the workers. "We," he said, gesturing to Rosa and the funders behind him, "are offering the exact same amount, but our offer isn't based on liquidation. It's based on growth." He held up a piece of paper. It was the letter of intent. "This is a signed LOI from Cascade Medworks, guaranteeing a $6.2 million contract over the next 18 months. This contract is contingent on us, the workers, taking ownership and meeting new, higher safety standards," the Oregonian reporter shouted. "Is that true? Is Cascade Medworks in on this?" From the third row, a man in a suit stood up. It was the head of procurement, the man Jonah had spoken to last night. "I am the representative from Cascade Medworks," he said, his voice carrying. "I can confirm We have full faith in the North Harbor Cooperative. Our contract is ironclad, pending their successful acquisition." The room was in chaos. CRC's PR woman was frantically whispering to her executives. They weren't just beaten, they were humiliated. They were exposed. Avery raised her hand for silence, and incredibly, she got it. "Mr. Blake," she said, her voice purely professional. "The North Harbor Cooperative Trust has legally and financially met the terms. The law is clear. You are required to sell to them at the identical price and terms. We have the acceptance memo here." She slid a single piece of paper across the mahogany table, placing it directly in front of my father. She placed a pen on top of it. This was the moment. The legal trap was sprung. The media trap was sprung. Now, there was only the human element. My father didn't look at the paper. He didn't look at Avery, or Rosa, or the CRC men who were already gathering their things, their faces like thunder. He looked past them all, to the back of the room. He looked right at me. His face was a storm of emotions, rage, betrayal, confusion, and for a fleeting, sickening moment, a sliver of pride. "You," he whispered. His voice was too low for the mics, but I could read his lips. "You did all of this. I didn't move from my spot. I gave him no help. I gave him no quarter. I just met his gaze and gave him the truth. I told you I wouldn't let you run it into the ground," I said, my voice just loud enough for him to hear. "I just opened the door. The people who deserved it walked in." He looked at me for a long, agonizing 10 seconds. He looked at the paper. He looked at Rosa, who was watching him with a lifetime of judgment in her eyes. He looked at Jonah, who stood unmoving, a pillar of the integrity my father had long since abandoned. He knew he was beaten, not by me, by his own signature, by his own arrogance. With a shaking hand, Robert Blake, the man who worshipped tangible assets, picked up the pen. He uncapped it. The sound of the click was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. He signed the paper. He accepted the trust's offer. He sold his company to his workers. The moment the ink was on the page, the lead CRC executive pointed at his own press team. "Pack it up. We're gone." He didn't look at my father. He just turned and stormed out the side exit, his team scrambling behind him, refusing to answer the volley of questions from the real reporters. My father sat there, alone at the massive table, a single, signed piece of paper in front of him. The explosion was immediate. We hadn't even left the Civic Center before the first online headlines hit. The Oregonian journalist, the one I had tipped, filed his story from the third row. It was a kill shot. Local workers flipped the script. North Harbor fabrication bought by employees, fending off Vulture Fund. By the time we got back to Avery's temporary office, the story was the #1 trending topic on every financial news aggregator. The video clip of my father's signature, juxtaposed with Rosa's speech and the CRC executive fleeing the room, was everywhere. It was a perfect, brutal narrative: David versus Goliath, Main Street versus Wall Street, integrity versus greed. The fallout for Cobalt Ridge Capital was catastrophic. This wasn't a quiet deal failing in arbitration. This was a public, humiliating rout. The story wasn't just about them losing, it was about how they lost. It was about the leaked addendum, the planned layoffs, the safety violations, and the fact that a group of welders, led by a 32-year-old logistician, had outmaneuvered them. By 3 p.m., the stock of a publicly traded manufacturing company in Ohio, one of CRC's recent bloody acquisitions, had dropped 9%. Their partners, their lenders, and their future targets were all seeing the same thing: Cobalt Ridge. Capital wasn't just ruthless. They were sloppy. They were vulnerable. My invisible trap had made them toxic. There was no celebration in our war room. There was only work. "It's done," Avery said, clicking her mouse. As of 2:30 p.m., the state of Oregon recognizes the full transfer of assets to the North Harbor Cooperative Trust. I've also filed the doing business as and the name change amendment. Goodbye. North Harbor Fabrication. Hello? North Harbor Cooperative Fabrication. NHCF. It was real. Jonah, Rosa, and the two funders were at the table. They looked stunned, exhausted, and terrified. They had just caught the wolf. Now they had to run the pack. "What's first?" Jonah asked. His voice was steady. He was no longer a welder. He was a leader. "First," I said, "we sign our contract." Avery slid 2 documents across the table. One was for the cooperative, the other was for me. It was the 24-month strategic service agreement for Flowgrid. No equity, no board seat, no ownership. I was the first and most critical contractor. My job was to deliver the profit that would pay for the company. Rosa and Jonah, as the new board co-chairs, signed. I signed. We shook hands. It was the driest, most meaningful transaction of my life. "Second," I said, flipping open my laptop. The projector lit up the wall. But this time, there was no simulation. It was a 90-day plan. "We start the turnaround. Now." The room snapped to attention. Day 1 through 30 full-spectrum audit. We don't just fix the machines. We X-ray the entire workflow. Harrison's safety team is already on site. Every piece of equipment gets a pass-fail rating. We establish a new baseline. We stop the bleeding. Day 31 through 60. Lean layout. We redesign the shop floor. The current layout is based on my father's ego big machines up front. The new layout will be based on data. Flowgrid dictates the most efficient path from raw steel to finished product. We will physically move the presses. Day 61 through 90. I looked at Rosa. 100% recertification. Every single employee, from the front office to the night shift, will be retrained and certified on the new safety protocols and the new workflow. Port Caldwell Tech starts Monday. Jonah looked at the aggressive timeline. "This is a lot, and the floor is spooked. They just heard layoffs for a week. Now they see you, the old boss's daughter, with a new plan. How do we get them to trust us?" "You don't just tell them, you show them," I said. "You announce the first new policy of the NHCF today." An hour later, Jonah and Rosa stood on a forklift pallet on the NHCF shop floor. The entire workforce gathered. The CRC banners were gone. Jonah held the microphone. "As of this moment," he announced, his voice booming, "the new minimum wage at North Harbor is $25 an hour, and as of the 1st of next month, we are implementing a new monthly profit-sharing program. When the company wins, everyone wins." A wave of stunned silence was followed by a roar that shook the I-beams. It wasn't just a cheer, it was a sigh of relief, a battle cry. It was the sound of 200 people realizing they weren't just employees anymore, they were owners. While they were resetting the culture, I was in the server room with 2 techs, physically integrating Flowgrid. For 2 days, I didn't sleep. I just ran data, mapping every single batch of steel, every weld, every single wasted movement. We launched the pilot program in week 2, focusing only on the plasma cutters and the high-tensile steel orders. The results were immediate. My father and Delilah had been running at a 17% scrap rate, 17 cents of every dollar, thrown in the bin. By the end of the first week of the pilot, Flowgrid's predictive purchasing and nesting algorithms had cut that number to 5%. By the end of week 2, we were at 3%. We had saved $80,000 in material waste in 14 days. The new inventory turnover models were even better. We had increased our cash flow by 10%. Simply by not buying steel we didn't need yet. The invisible asset was now printing very visible, very real money. Of course, the old guard didn't go quietly. Delilah sent me a text. "Can we talk?" I met her at a coffee shop. She looked small and exhausted. "I'm sorry, Natalie," she said, twisting her hands. I just wanted to make Dad proud. I didn't read the documents. I didn't understand what CRC was." "I know, Delilah." "What do I do now?" she asked, her voice small. "You stop trying to be a CEO," I said, sliding a pamphlet across the table. It was the same Port Caldwell tech program the welders were taking. And you start learning. They have a production management certification. Learn how the floor actually works. Learn what a term sheet is. Start at the beginning. She looked at the pamphlet, then at me. For the first time, I didn't see jealousy. I saw a flicker of resolve. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll register." My father was a different problem. He didn't text. He didn't call. He issued a press release. It was a masterpiece of political spin, no doubt drafted by an expensive lawyer. He fully supported the transition. He was thrilled to see the company he built enter a new era of community-focused stewardship. He praised the innovative solution that would preserve the Port Caldwell legacy. He took credit for the entire thing, painting himself as the wise patriarch who had overseen a smooth, planned transfer of power. I read it and laughed. He was trying to write the history of his own defeat, but the new NHCF didn't care about his press release. They were too busy. The story of the buyout and the immediate, data-driven turnaround had become a legend in the regional manufacturing world. My phone rang. It was a contractor. "I heard you're the new anchor for Cascade Medworks," he said. "We're building 2 new urgent care clinics. We need a supplier who can actually meet a deadline and a safety spec. Can you send me a bid?" An hour later, another call. An agricultural technology firm. "We're building vertical farming frames. We need high-grade, food-safe steel. We heard you're the only shop in Oregon that can do it right. Are you taking new clients?" I looked at the whiteboard, at my 90-day plan. I looked at the flow grid dashboard, at the new green lines of efficiency. "Yes," I said. "We are—" The line was forming. The calls didn't stop. But they had changed. They were no longer from lawyers or angry funders. They were from suppliers, potential clients, and logistics managers. The 90-day plan was in its 40th day, and NHCF was not just stable, it was accelerating. The safety audit was complete, the floor reorganization was underway, and FlowGrid had already saved the cooperative over $100,000 in raw material waste. Then, a call came that stopped me cold. It was from my father. His voice was not the boom of the CEO or the sneer of the man at the yacht club. It was quiet, thin. "Natalie," he said, "meet me at Pier 4, the old pilings." He didn't say please. He just stated it. Then he hung up. Pier 4 wasn't a yacht club. It wasn't even a functional dock. It was a skeleton. The last rotting stumps of the old timber pier where the first mills had stood. It was where the town's industry had been born, and where it had been left to die. I arrived just as the sun was setting. The sky was a bruised purple and orange, and the low tide exposed mudflats that smelled of salt and decay. The surface of the water was slick with a rainbow sheen of diesel oil. Reflecting the last light, he was already there, standing at the end of the broken concrete barrier, his hands deep in the pockets of an old work jacket. He looked smaller. I stood a few feet away from him. We didn't greet each other. We just watched the oily water. "I thought you wanted power," he said finally, his voice flat, aimed at the horizon. "I thought this whole thing, the computers, the algorithms, was just some complicated, passive-aggressive way to prove you were smarter than me, to take my chair." "I never wanted your chair, Dad," I said. My voice was just as quiet. "I wanted rules." "Rules," he scoffed, but it was a weak, broken sound. "You built that company by breaking every rule you could. You bullied suppliers. You ignored safety. You broke the union, and you almost broke the company. I just enforced the one rule you forgot you'd signed." He turned to look at me, and in the fading light, I saw he was an old man. The anger was gone, replaced by a deep, profound confusion. "I laughed at you," he whispered, the confession torn from him. "At the club, I laughed. You know why?" I waited. "Because I was scared." He said it so low I almost missed it. "Scared. I built it from nothing, from rust and mud, and I was terrified. I was terrified it would die in the hands of someone who wasn't blood, that all of it, my whole life, would just be sold off for scrap by some stranger. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. "So you gave it to them," I said. "You were so afraid of me, your blood, letting it die, that you handed it over to the one fund in the country guaranteed to mummify it. They weren't strangers. Dad, they were butchers. You weren't selling it for scrap. You were paying them to dissect the machines, hollow out the pension fund, and fire the people who built it with you." He visibly flinched. He knew it was true. He had read the addendum. He had seen the proof. They told me it was synergy, a partnership," he mumbled, turning back to the water. "They lied, and you wanted to believe them, because it was easier than believing in me." We stood in silence for another minute. The last sliver of sun vanished, and the cold and damp air moved in. "So what now?" he asked the water. "You won. You took it. You humiliated me. You have your cooperative. What do you want from me?" "I don't want anything from you," I said. "But the cooperative, they need something only you have." He looked at me, wary. "The Cascade MedWorks contract is contingent on us reaching a new, gold standard OSHA certification. Harrison's audit found 24 legacy problems, things you built, or built around, for 30 years. The welders can fix them, but they don't know the whole history. They don't know where all the bodies are buried." "I do," he said. "Yes, you do." I reached into my coat pocket. I hadn't come unarmed. I pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. "This is a memorandum of honor. It's not a legal contract. It's not for pay." I held it out to him. 6 months. You come on as an unpaid strategic consultant to the NHCF Safety Committee. Your only job is to work with Jonah and Rosa to get every single item on that audit to gold standard compliance. You teach the new generation every dirty secret of that building, and you help them fix it." He stared at the paper. "You're joking. You want me to work for them, for Jonah Price." "I want you to finish the job you started," I said. "I want you to make the plant safe, the way it should have been all along." "And if I do," he sneered, "what do I get?" "Absolution. You get this." I pointed to the second clause on the paper. "If you complete the 6-month term and Harrison signs off on the gold certification, the North Harbor Cooperative Fabrication, in partnership with Port Caldwell Tech, will officially endow a new, permanent scholarship, the Robert Blake Master Welder Scholarship. It will pay for 1 new apprentice every year, forever." I saw his hand tremble. I had offered him the one thing he'd lost: a legacy, not an empire built on debt and intimidation, but a future built on skill. His name, tied not to a failed sale, but to the craft itself. He didn't take the paper. He just stared at the oily water. He looked at his own hands, calloused and thick, the hands that had built and almost destroyed. "Let me do the right thing," he said, his voice thick. "Just let me do this one thing right, this time." He nodded. "Once. I'll be there Monday." He walked past me, back toward the gravel lot. Not looking back, I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. The new structure was settling. The pieces were finding their place. I received an email the next day with a 1-line subject registration query. It was from Delilah. The body of the email was formal. Short: "Ms. Thomas, I am interested in the production management certification program you mentioned. Can you provide the contact information for the registrar?" I didn't respond with emotion. I just forwarded her the email address for the head of the program at the community college. It was a simple, clean transaction. She was no longer my rival. She was just a student. I was at NHCF, in the newly reorganized office wing, running a flow grid diagnostic when Rosa stopped by my desk. The office was brighter. The walls were painted. There was a sense of energy, of purpose, that had never been there under my father. "You're going to get a ticket," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "A ticket for what?" "Parking. You're still parking in the visitor's spot." She slid a laminated badge onto my desk. It wasn't a visitor's pass. It was a permanent access card. North Harbor Cooperative Fabrication, it read. Strategic partner, access all areas. On the back, under the magnetic strip, was a list of signatures, not from a machine. They were real. Rosa, Jonah, and a dozen other welders and machinists. "It's from the floor," she said. "You're always welcome here. Natalie, you're one of us." I held the card, the weight of it heavier than any stock certificate. Later that week, Jonah found me calibrating a sensor on the main cutter. The plant was loud, but it was a different sound. It wasn't the scream of machines being pushed to their limit. It was the hum of equipment running in sync. "He showed up," Jonah said over the noise. "Who?" "Your father. He's in the boiler room with the maintenance crew right now, arguing about hydraulic pressure. He's actually helping." "Good," I said, closing the panel. "The board's been talking," Jonah said, wiping his hands on a rag. "This is working. The profits are real. The Cascade contract is solid. We're grateful. We're all earning it. Jonah, I know. Which is why we want to offer you a board seat, a real one. The 4th seat, you've earned it 10 times over. The floor trusts you. If you want it, it's yours." This was it. The offer my father thought I'd wanted, the power he dangled and then denied. The chair. It was being offered to me freely, by the very people I had helped. I smiled at him. I thought of my father, obsessed with bloodlines and legacy, and I thought of the ecosystem I wanted to build. "Thank you, Jonah. It's the greatest honor I've ever been given," he smiled, expecting me to accept. "No, thank you," I said. "My name doesn't belong on that board. Keep that 4th seat. In 2 years, when the Harbor Impact Fund's term is up, give it to the brightest young welder on your floor. Give it to the apprentice who just graduated from the tech program." Jonah's smile faded, replaced by a look of profound understanding. He nodded slowly. "You really meant it, didn't you?" he said. "You're not a Blake, are you?" "I'm Natalie Thomas," I said, picking up my tablet. "And I'm late for a client meeting. Keep the machines running. Chairman." The official launch of North Harbor Cooperative Fabrication was not held in a gilded ballroom, not at the Yacht Club, and not at the Civic Center. It was held on a Tuesday, at the 2 p.m. shift change, on the main fabrication floor. They didn't stop the machines, not all of them. The roar of the plasma cutters was muted. The heavy presses were idled. But the sound of the new ventilation system was a clean, powerful hum. The air didn't smell of old oil and bourbon. It smelled of ozone, clean steel, and the faint, sharp scent of new paint. It was the smell of progress. Above the main gantry, my father's old, faded, days since last accident sign was gone. In its place, a massive, gleaming digital display fed real-time data from FlowGrid and the safety sensors. It read, "Worker days lost to accidents. 30 days 0. Material scrap rate reduction, YTD, 22%. Order backlog filled for 2 quarters." The invisible asset was now blinking in bright green numbers for everyone to see. The CEO of Cascade Medworks stood on a freshly painted forklift pallet, a makeshift stage. He wasn't just holding the old letter of intent, he was holding a thick, bound master contract. "The LOI we signed was based on a promise," he announced, his voice echoing in the vast space. "This new, official, multi-year contract is based on performance, on results." He held it up. As of today, Cascade Medworks is tying its contract ceiling directly to the performance KPIs of FlowGrid. You save us money, you maintain this safety record, and your contract value grows. We are proud to be your partners. The mayor of Port Caldwell was next, handing Jonah a plaque for the Community Impact Award, but the real applause came for the people standing on the floor. I watched from the sidelines, leaning against a newly organized rack of raw steel. I saw Rosa call up a name I hadn't expected. Delilah. My cousin walked to the pallet. She wasn't in a borrowed power suit. She was in clean jeans and a standard-issue polo from the Port Caldwell Technical College. Her hands were shaking as she held a single sheet of paper. "I don't stand here as a manager," she said, her voice quiet but carried by the microphone. "I stand here as a student. I was given a position I didn't earn, and I didn't understand. I failed to read the documents. I failed to protect the people I worked with. I admit my mistakes." She took a deep breath. "My commitment now is to learn, from the ground up, to earn my place, and to understand what it actually means to build something." She received a wave of quiet, respectful applause. She hadn't asked for forgiveness. She had asked for a chance to learn. Then, Jonah gestured to the side. "We have one more person to recognize." My father stepped forward. He was in his old work boots, but they were clean. He looked thinner, but his posture was straight. "Robert Blake," Jonah said, and the name held no malice. "Completed the gold standard safety audit 3 weeks ahead of schedule. He personally climbed into every crawl space and recertified every pressure valve in this building." My father didn't make a speech. He took a newly printed metal sign from Jonah. It was a simple, bright red, danger lockout, tag out area sign. He walked over to the main control panel for the number 3 press, the one Harrison's audit had deemed a death trap. He took a drill, and with precise, practiced movements, he installed the sign himself. He checked that it was level. He tightened the last bolt. He nodded, once, to Rosa. Jonah returned to the microphone. "In honor of the person who taught most of us how to weld, and who represents the true heart of this floor, we are announcing the new Rosa Delgado Apprenticeship Fund, seeded by 1% of our profits from the very first month." As if on cue, the massive bay doors at the far end of the workshop rolled open. A river of afternoon sunlight poured in, and silhouetted in it was a group of 20 young men and women in safety glasses and bright blue jackets, the new class of apprentices from the technical college, here for their first tour of the future. My father watched them file in, his eyes tracking their faces. He walked to the microphone. He looked at the students, at Jonah, at Rosa, and then his eyes found mine, across the floor. "The day my daughter told me no," he said, his voice gravelly, but clear. Every machine now silent. "The day she refused my company." I laughed. I laughed because I didn't understand her rules. I thought power was about holding on. I thought legacy was about blood. He looked at the new digital board, at the glowing 0 for accidents. "Today," he said, "I'm learning how to say yes to her rules, the ones based on safety, the ones based on data, the ones based on trusting the people who do the work. It's a better way. It's the right way." The silence held. Then Jonah stepped up, a wide smile on his face. "I have one final piece of news. As of today, NHCF has signed a new 3-year framework agreement. We will be the exclusive fabricator for a new line of advanced medical device skeletons. This contract solidifies our future and ensures we hire, not fire." He paused, letting it sink in. "Our new partner is Riverton Atlas Labs." I smiled. My old company, the ecosystem was complete. "And," Jonah added, looking toward Delilah, who was standing with the new students, "our new intern project coordinator for the RAL contract, representing NHCF, will be Delilah Blake, a full circle, not a handout, a beginning, earned." I began to fade back, letting them have the stage. I looked past the celebration, at a new sign, bolted to the brick wall near the time clock. It was simple. "Owned by the people who work here." My eyes felt clear, not soft, not hard, just clear. My cousin Mason, his phone nowhere in sight, approached Jonah, twisting a new hard hat in his hands. "Mr. Price?" he said, his voice hesitant. This is an amazing story. I was wondering, could I make a documentary, a video about the worker's journey?" Jonah nodded, then pointed to the new safety compliance officer. "Absolutely. You can start Monday. You're the new safety intern. Your first job is checking the expiration dates on all 140 fire extinguishers." Mason, for the first time in his life, just nodded and said, "Yes, sir," a reporter, the same one from the Oregonian, spotted me as I was slipping toward the exit. "Ms. Thomas," she called out, rushing over, microphone in hand. "One last question. Do you have any regrets? You turned down a $5 million company. Do you regret it?" I stopped. I turned back, looking at the celebration, at the blue-white flash of a welding torch in the distance where a worker was already back on the line. "I didn't reject the value," I said. "I rejected the wrong owner." I turned and walked away. The main shift was ending. The camera, in my mind, panned past a pair of heavy work gloves, hanging on a hook next to the new company rulebook. At the bottom of the last page, there wasn't one signature. There were 200. As I reached the side door, it pushed open. The second shift was walking in. They were laughing, punching the clock, grabbing their gear, the real new owners, arriving for their shift. I walked out into the late afternoon sun, the light golden on the pavement. One no at the right time was enough to let an entire town say yes to everything that came after. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so curious. Where in the world are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments so we can connect. Please share your thoughts, subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, and like this video. And if this story moved you, please support us by hitting that hype button so more people can hear it.